and then click over to YouTube and see how it looks there. It's still not live there. Now it is. All right.
All right, I think we are live now. Let's see. Yeah, it's going live on my end.
Yeah, I'm putting out a tweet. Okay. So. Oh no, I exited where I wanted to start from because I checked my notifications. I'm so stupid. Do you two want to introduce yourselves real quick? Because it's going to save as a VOD anyway.
I
Yeah, go
am
ahead.
James, or otherwise known as Thucydides Trap Lord, on my long forgotten story.
Can you get closer to wherever your mic is? You're pretty quiet.
Oh, yep, sorry. Turn the mic volume down. My name is James. I'm Thucydides Trap Lord on Twitter, usually. Blame Musk for that. And I do defense stuff.
Defense stuff. Got it.
Yeah, hi, I'm Daedalus Media. I am one half of the channel Two Guys Talking History. We do history and political analysis.
I'm, of course, John from 5th Gen Information Warfare. We pretty much look at information warfare channels with different groups around the world and monitor them, things like that, and make sure people don't get misinformed with terrorist narratives and stuff like that. Okay, so to start, I have this. This is a tweet of a video that the IDF posted. So I know some people might be upset that I'm starting with a source from the IDF, but it's a good summary. So
since 6:30 a.m., Israel is officially in a state of war. Hamas have been launching rockets non-stop, now reaching approximately 3,000. Terrorists have infiltrated into Israel territory from Gaza, taking hostages and murdering civilians. Children, families, and entire communities are under attack. At this time, the IDF is reinforcing the south with forces, recruiting reserves, and striking critical Hamas targets. Hamas will pay a heavy price for this inhumane attack against Israel.
okay. So I guess I'm just going to open it up to responses and thoughts. Whoever wants to go first.
Go ahead, James.
There's sort of... I know the IDF technically has to mobilize guys south to try and push out these, well, I guess, more raiding parties than anything. But it's sort of what the Hamas wants, right? They're like a mass shooter who wants to put fake guns in the hands of all the students, if that makes sense. So the police shoot up the whole entire school.
Like Joker mode.
Yeah, Joker mode. It's not... And the IDF is probably... Well, it's going to do... It is going to reflexively respond in its worst possible way, and that can be quite bad given IDF standards. It probably won't be enough to sour Israel's bettering of relations in the region, because, quite frankly, the Saudis, the Emiratis, Turkey, they don't really give a shit about what Israel does in Palestine, but it's going to make them look bad no matter what, though.
Yeah, this is a. I think this is a bit of a coup for Hamas to get away with this in the first place. Obviously, questions will have to be answered. I think about how one of the more effective surveillance states allowed this to occur without them knowing about it. Um, I don't think it's going to be. I don't think we're seeing the end of this anytime soon. Um, this is an almost unprecedented level of success for Hamas, I think, in the last 30 years. So
Yeah, they have killed the most people since the second Intifada. So I think
I think the casualty count
I had
is already
was,
well above.
Go ahead.
Already well above 3,000 when you take in both sides into account.
Yeah, I only had like much lower, like 200 Israeli citizens. But
There's something on the order of close to 1,000 wounded. I heard
1,200 Israeli wounded, like 250 Israeli dead, and I think Palestinian counts are pointing it at well over 200 Palestinians dead, and a similar number of wounded to the Israelis. So it's approaching 3,000, and there's still fighting ongoing now.
And then what do we think about the whole entrance with these what people keep calling like hang gliders and stuff, but these are paramotors. They're like
paragliders.
Yeah. Well, the paraglider is technically without the machine itself. So like the parachute is a paraglider, but once you throw in the machine there, it becomes an aircraft, and you have to like register it differently or something. Point is like you can't just learn how to fly these overnight. And there is a video that Hamas themselves posted that's nice in HD from this.
Yeah, I don't think I've actually seen one of those since The World Is Not Enough.
That's what I said. That's what I said.
Yes. Where they do the skiing scene and throw the grenades up the side.
It's one of the best scenes in James Bond, though. It rules. That scene's awesome.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that for a long time. I guess those are small. They don't have much of a radar cross section, and they fly pretty low. So, to a certain extent, I suppose it made a certain amount of sense to use that.
I think it's to use it, but it's how did they learn? Because you can't just be flying around in Gaza with those.
No, someone set this up somewhere, maybe in Lebanon or maybe even Syria. Maybe not Syria. There's probably a hard time.
Possibly. There's
probably a hard time getting privacy in Syria. But like someone had to set that up. A little training camp where they did that.
Yeah, Lebanon sounds like the correct idea or correct place. I mean, it's sort of one of those gimmicky things that terror organizations like to use, or not like to use. This is probably the first time I've ever seen them use a paramotor, but it's not useful, right? But it looks cool, so it's designed to appeal to the not tactically sophisticated young mind who thinks, "Oh, this organization is flashy. Let me join them." I mean, because
it's a bit of a Potemkin video, I think, really, because I imagine that the vast majority of the fighters who emerged in southern Israel last night, were coming through tunnels and not coming off of paragliders. So it's definitely a Potemkin thing, I think, more than a genuine infiltration.
Can you explain what you mean by that, please?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I'm referring to the idea of a Potemkin village, which was a story about a series of fake villages set up in Russia in order to impress I believe it was the Tsarina at the time. They're flashy but not real.
Yeah, kind of like how North Korea has the fake houses on the border there.
Yeah, it's in the same vein of those training videos you see, for example, in Belarus.
Jumping through fire hoops.
Yes, where they're doing that, or North Korea. It's a very similar thing. It's designed to look cool and be impressive to a particular crowd, but not necessarily efficacious when it comes time to actually doing things.
The thing is that, like you said, the low radar signature, I think it was kind of a genius move I think this is one of those things that's only going to work once, though, kind of like how 9/11 was genius, but there's no way it's going to happen again.
Yeah. I think something to mention is had they been close to even one AAA gun, they probably would have just ended right there.
Or just like 5 guys with AKs or M4s or whatever,
Yeah.
or what, Galeos.
So, James, a lot of people have been throwing around the words that this is a massive intelligence failure from Israel. How do you think about that?
That's probably an exaggeration somewhat, right? Because we all know that, I guess anybody who is familiar with uh, the region knows that Hamas has long been stockpiling quite a few rockets, artillery, etc., etc. And we all know that the tunnels exist. The one thing that we didn't know necessarily is when this attack would take place and how large it would be. And you can't necessarily know that unless you have, depending on the sophistication of Hamas's organization, right? If you just say, if you have like 10 guys or 10 groups of 10 guys who just take orders via cell phone saying, hey, go through this tunnel at this time and kidnap these people. If one person's giving that order to the 10 groups, then you're not going to have like a lot of foresight as to when an attack would take place.
Yeah,
So
and
it's hard.
that's how Al Qaeda had the advantage too. Almost nobody in the organization knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not necessarily impossible. If you could predict these sorts of attacks, I mean, the scale is probably a bit unique, but if you could predict these sorts of attacks, then you could basically dismantle the organization, right? So you can't really do that, right? Because it's sort of a catch-22 in a sense. Because if you have the intelligence necessary to crush this attack before it happened, then this attack and the organization itself wouldn't exist. But since the best leading intelligence organizations in the world can't predict these attacks, then it's hard to deem it an intelligence failure.
Do you want to
Yeah,
follow up on that? Go ahead.
There's a certain degree to which I think there's a problem with monitoring cells, right? You have to know who's in the cell and what they're doing. And if you get like 3 cells getting an order, you might not catch the other cells. It's very difficult to figure out what the size and scale of these kinds of operations are from the outside because you only see bits and pieces of it.
I think like from when it first kicked off, I was pretty concerned that like it would be like, because they've been calling for the third Intifada for a while.
Yes.
So I wanted to get into a little bit of the history of what exactly that means. And before I let you go off on that, I think just because of the nature of what we just spoke on with the size of the cells and things like that is exactly why we didn't see reserve attack come in. When the first videos came back of people bringing people into Gaza, like hostages and corpses being paraded around, all those videos, that's when I felt like it wasn't going to escalate, and that was pretty much the worst of it, and it was going to be more of like downscaled from there and mostly rocket attacks, and that seems kind of what has happened. But I think there's, as far as we know, 3 areas still under control, and I've heard reported they engaged with the fighters on 21 different points, but that was very early on. So anyway, history, please.
Fair enough. So the Intifadas are, broadly speaking, periods of time when the Palestinians as a whole, either in the form of the Palestinian Authority or other groups, have basically risen up and fought the Israelis. The second one wasn't actually that long ago, which is considered the more deadly and violent of the two. The second one began shortly thereafter, the closeout of the Oslo Accords in September of 2000. It was precipitated, or at least thought to be precipitated by at the time, a visit from Ariel Sharon to a site in Jerusalem, and then there was a Palestinian violent response, which contributed to the IDF responding in kind and fighting broke out within Gaza very shortly and lasted for about 5 years until 2005. This is obviously early, so it's very difficult to say if that's going to become something similar. It's going to become something similar to this. But like I think the key here is that these are high watermarks for Hamas and what they accomplish. So the second Intifada, that Israel withdraws from Gaza, which allows this entire operation to take place in the first place, giving them a base in Gaza effectively. And this is where they built the West Bank barrier and all that. So like this is kind of like the defining bit for the last 20 or so years of Israeli history and Palestinian history. And today is very possibly going to be a resurgence of that same kind of conflict.
James, what do you think about the follow-up in violence from this? Where do you think it's going to come from? What other actors might get involved with that?
Hezbollah, actually, there are videos of Hezbollah moving guys southwards to Lebanon,
Yeah,
but it's unclear if they're going to join in. Iran's guys in Syria probably aren't going to do much because of the Golan Heights. IDF presence there is quite strong because it's usually there to stave off threats from Syria. So it kind of looks like Hamas is more or less on its own, unless their cousins in the West Bank decide to join the fun, but they're not as well equipped. Sorry. It sort of might depend on how the Israeli government chooses to respond, right? Because Hamas was a bit clever about this attack. Instead of just a spasmodic unrest or spasmodic violence, they took a bunch of hostages and captives, and that was designed to temper the Israeli government's response, right? Because the IDF, when it's left to its own devices, would probably just flatten all of Gaza. Because, well, they can, and that's sort of just what they historically have done. So they're probably going to, look for talks first, extract concessions from the Israelis. I'm not sure if that'll work because it's Netanyahu, but it may or may not escalate substantially from here, right? Because this doesn't necessarily look like a concerted invasion by Hamas or like a bog standard terror attack. It was a fairly well coordinated raid with limited goals and limited aims and objectives. It wasn't designed to be.
What do you think those goals and objectives were?
I would have to be more well versed in, I guess, the tensions or talks between the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority, but it looks outwardly like Hamas was trying to capitalize on tensions between the IDF, well, not necessarily the IDF, but tensions between the Israeli government and its citizens over democracy, right? Because, as we know, the IDF, a bunch of its reservists were stood down or protesting, and they're variously angry over Netanyahu's government crippling its Supreme Court, or Israel's Supreme Court. So it looked like they were sort of just trying to garner or grab concessions while the Israeli government was sort of at a weak point.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. You know, you had that couple months back where there were mass protests by Israelis of Netanyahu's effort to delegitimize the courts effectively in regards to his corruption trial. And the concessions that went around at that time to his ministers, the formation of a National Guard and whatnot, I think gave the impression that there was a chance to launch this kind of attack.
Keep going, but I want to follow up on that, but keep going.
Yeah, I also think that they might be trying to elicit the very same response from the IDF that we're considering of them going into Gaza and you know, basically flattening Gaza. I think they might be trying to elicit that very same response. It's, again, early to see what's going to happen and how Israel's going to respond, how the IDF decides to treat this situation.
I do have a video from BB, if you want to see how that that guy. What's funny about BB is people are saying like this whole thing with Trump being like a criminal president is unprecedented in democracy, and I'm like, oh, but we're calling Israel the greatest democracy in the Middle East. They literally have the same thing going on.
Yeah.
But I think a big part of it is so when we have been monitoring the info channels with especially Palestinian diaspora, the Lion's Den has been very captivating. The Lion's Den are a group that are located in the West Bank. They have been extremely effective against the Israeli government. And I don't know if it was under Netanyahu, somebody correct me, but they actually did a drone strike in the West Bank, which was a major escalation on Israel's part. It was the first time they've drone striked the West Bank. But there's a lot of important Palestinian shaheeds that came out of these Lion's Den assaults. And before that, we also had the first ISIS attacks that happened in Israel, where they opened fired on a police station and then civilians on the street. All while this was going on, Hamas basically was silent. We saw almost nothing from Hamas, but Palestinian Islamic Jihad was continually calling for the third Intifada. The CIA confirmed these findings in February, and so did the UN, that they've definitely been signaling for this. So this, when it first came out, I was like, hey, like this might be the third one here. Let me just pull up that video of BB real quick. If the Palestinians also put out videos making statements, I'd play those. But they, I have propaganda and stuff from them, the videos they made. But
I suspect they might be out of electricity soon.
oh, they already shut off electricity. I think I saw that. An hour or so ago. Yeah.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה, לא במבצע, לא בסבבים, במלחמה. הבוקר חמאס פתח במתקפת פתע רצחני נגד מדינת ישראל ונגד אזרחיה. אנחנו בתוך זה משעות הבוקר המוקדמות. כינסתי את ראשי מערכת הביטחון, הנחיתי קודם כל לטהר את היישובים מהמחבלים שחדרו פנימה. הפעולה הזאת מתבצעת בשעות הללו. במקביל הוריתי לבצע גיוס מילואים נרחב ולהשיב מלחמה שערה בעוצמה ובהיקף שהאויב לא הכיר. האויב ישלם מחיר שהוא לא ידע מותו. אני קורא בינתיים לכל אזרחי ישראל להישמע בקפדנות להנחיות הצבא, להנחיות פיקוד העורף. אנחנו במלחמה ואנחנו ננצח בה.
So a lot of people have said that this rhetoric is extreme coming from Israel. How do we feel about that?
I don't really know if it's extreme.
It sounds about normal for BB.
Yeah,
well,
normal.
for
It sounds
BB,
about
yes,
like
but
Netanyahu.
for Israel,
To be perfectly honest, Netanyahu's been around for a while.
That's what
It kind of feels like we've been at this for a little bit. Like I kind of expect him to be the new Israeli normal. And so like it doesn't seem out of place for him, and it doesn't seem out of place for to be perfectly frank, is effectively a far right government.
oh yeah.
And
Everyone
how they're
knows.
going.
Everyone will say this.
Yeah, and how they're operate. Like that sounds about par for the course. Like whether the reaction actually is that, you obviously got to assume that Hamas has prepared for retaliation in some way. So
Yeah, and the video we showed earlier with the Hezbollah fighters moving onto the border, Hezbollah's statement specifically said that if a ground assault is launched into Gaza, that they will invade from the north. I don't believe anything Hezbollah says. I kind of think they're a joke. I mean, you can see our terrorist tier list for that we did with James. But the point is that those threats are there, and there's a lot of important geopolitics deals going on, like recognizing Israel with Saudi Arabia, even the nuclear talks with Iran going on right now. But what I see from Hezbollah's statement is bomb Gaza as much as you want, as long as you don't go in there, then everything is going to be fine. So if I was Netanyahu, that's pretty much how I would see it. Thankfully, I'm not him, though.
Yes, but I feel that's good for all of us. What is this Taliban public relations? That's not a real Taliban account.
That's a fake
No,
account.
they're not. No,
Okay.
James and I know all about this guy. It's really funny though.
Why are American politicians? Never mind. I don't want to know.
Because they're
It's a
stupid.
long story, but like even the Taliban have denounced him, being like, "This guy is
Repeatedly.
not us." The Taliban are actually convinced that it's a CIA op to make them look bad.
It's
Like a Trump level map, and American politicians are going, well, look at these people who just got all this what money? It's equipment. It gets left behind. Chill
The
out there,
Taliban
Robert.
did make a statement. It's
They
even
did.
more worthless than Hezbollah's. It was something like, if Middle Eastern countries grant us access to come through their borders, we'll come fight. Which is like, okay, next, that's not happening. Iran doesn't even like you. You know,
no.
like, shut up.
That's the Taliban didn't even make that. The Taliban statement was, "Wow, you guys really, there really needs to be peace in the Middle East," and that was about it. They didn't even say we would send fighters across borders, right? They straight
That's
up
what was
just said,
reported, so I didn't
"Oh
look
yeah,
at them
that was
directly.
the fake report." They were
Okay.
referencing Taliban PRD.
Oh, really? That's so funny. That's fucking awesome. That's even funnier. Sorry.
So pain.
I can't. I just. And you got apparently the right-wing politicians saying that Biden gave Iran a whole bunch of money.
Yeah, we
which
actually
hasn't
reported on
happened.
this recently in a video as well, and we have
Just
I think,
hasn't
videos coming
happened.
out about it. But sorry to interrupt you. Please go ahead.
You can tell it's campaigning season. Yeah, you can tell
Yeah.
it's campaigning season here in America.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, that's. I was saying to James before we started. That's my biggest problem right now, is them trying to bring American politics into it, and like how, like everything, like I put on a CFR thing, and they were even trying to link it to Iran, and it's like, okay, I understand like rockets and shit come from Iran, but they're trying to make it seem like the U.S. gave them $6 billion for these hostages, which didn't happen. It was literally their money, and it was paid to them by South Korea, right, for oil. They got sanctioned, and that money got held. So for hostage negotiations, part of that was to unlock funds that were rightfully Iran's. And they try to compare this to like when Obama fucking like brought out pallets of cash or whatever, but nobody gives a shit and nobody remembers Obama. They're just like living through their trauma of having a black president over and over again.
Lost their goddamn minds in 2008. It hasn't gotten any better since.
No, it hasn't. It hasn't. No, it's worse, actually. It's a lot worse, but they're going to lose, so it doesn't really matter. There's like no way they can win with the genocidal and fascist rhetoric they're throwing out in response to this, specifically talking about how like basically they want to steamroll Gaza.
Yeah.
So while those paramotor attacks came in, there was a coordinated ground assault as well. People have been saying land, sea, and air. There was like an attempted sea landing, and I think those boats all got shot to shit. And because that's where your radar is going to be the best, anyways, in the water.
Yeah.
And this is censored, but I'm going to skip one part because you can totally see a little too much in it. If it's the one I'm thinking of. Hopefully this one's just all good. And they have good, yeah, see, right there is what I didn't want to pause on. I wanted to skip that. Anyway. Clearly military vehicles, they have access. And these appear to be like maybe barracks, right?
Yeah, this looks like
Yeah.
a barracks.
So they clearly have control over this military position right here in the beginning.
I think this the base with the actually there's not a lot of trees here. There was another facility, another barracks or outpost where they captured a bunch, like 8 APCs.
Yeah, I guess the armor damage to the IDF is pretty extreme.
Yeah, I think there's at least 3 burned out Merkavas.
Yeah, there. Someone said 4, someone said 3. You're not going to know for a couple days for sure, for real. A lot of the same problems that OSINT has with Ukraine, they're going to have here.
they're going to be worse.
Yeah, overestimating certain
Dude,
things.
have you seen the Hind helicopters video? That's
Oh, God,
going
yes.
viral right now.
I don't. It's so not uncommon to see like Arma 3 footage being used for this stuff, but like you'd think people would get used to it by now. Like
That especially looked really bad too.
Yes.
Normally, if they do it at night, they can get away with it. But
right up until the part, there was a great part a couple months back where I saw some Arma 3 footage of an ambush in Ukraine, and it's at night, and they got the night vision crap on the camera. But then when the vehicles get hit, you hear the sound of the cook-off animation for Arma 3. It's like, yep, that's it.
the thing is with Arma 3 and combat simulators, a lot of people like kind of underestimate the point of why those are circulating. It's not just because a lot of these people who claim to be open source intelligence journalists are dumb. That's part of it. A lot of them are fake to begin with, but there's a perfect example of this. So when the Taliban took over the Afghan Republic, one of the last battles in the Sanjir Valley, what is it? Panjshir Valley, one of the last battles in Panjshir Valleys. Pakistan was seen on the ground, their intelligence apparatus there on the ground meeting with the Taliban, and we have confirmed reports and footage of the debris of a Pakistani, if I said Palestinian, I meant Pakistani drone that was used. So we know for a fact that Pakistan was backing the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. But Pakistan did, especially India helped, because India has to report on any rumor in Pakistan and like go crazy. India has been real funny with this too, like the Indian support of like Israel and the Zionism. Anyway, so they start putting out old things, like they put out a post showing a downed aircraft, saying an aircraft was down. They purposely put that out to later fact check it with their own sources, right?
Jesus
so
Christ.
then it discredits all this Indian media, right? So a lot of times when you see this Arma 3 footage go around, that's the point of it. It's an information warfare attack that they're doing to discredit people.
Yeah, no, like that's kind of the thing. Like we're gonna probably do more on this later in the week. And I wanted to sit on it a couple days so we could start to separate fact from fiction. But like it's been wild on Twitter all night and into the day with what is. Oh, this is just precious. Actually, the tank getting bombed by the drone, and people trying to link it to Russia because they forgot that other people exist.
This was invented by the Houthis, to my knowledge, almost a decade ago. James might disagree.
I don't know. It was either Daesh or the Houthis.
I don't think so. ISIS did have it as have it. I've seen drone bombs from ISIS as well, so you might be right there. But
it's a fairly natural evolution.
Same time frame, 2014. You know, a while ago.
You're probably right. I think it's probably the Houthis, because when Daesh was moving, they weren't doing a lot of drone footage, right? Because they had just had tanks and armored vehicles. And the Houthis started with Bupkis.
Yeah, we saw most of the drones come in at like 2017 there. So I think the Houthis technically might have been first. Either way, it's one or the other.
It's also a natural evolution of, small drones. Hook a bomb up and drop it. It's not necessarily like... It's something that we should have assumed would happen when drones became more cheaper and widespread. It also, I think, highlights well, basically every military is going to have to figure out better ways of dealing with that and protecting units from that in the future.
Oh, I got another video of armor damage here. That isn't from Arma, of course. This is one of the more populated images that have been going around. So, I think a lot of these people are just regular citizens from Gaza. Because I think a lot of, once the border fence, there's a video of a bulldozer like taking down the entire border fence. So I think a lot of people who would have been in things like the March of Great Return and things like that also took advantage of this and got selfies of a burned out tank, but probably had nothing to do with the destruction of this tank. I think I've seen like one gun on maybe. They got a whole case and everything. It looks like he like pulled it out of his gun locker and just got there, you know? He's like, so I think these are all just
I think this one's the tank where there were the 3 people that were pulled out. 2 people were alive. 1 guy was dead next to the tank.
Just as a general safety advice for everyone, don't stand near burning tanks.
Yeah.
Don't.
It's not a T-72, but it'll still blow up.
Yeah. Eventually, something might get to that ammunition locker, and then everyone's just dead. Just don't stand near burning tanks. That's my general advice. I saw one person today try to compare all of this to Ukraine bombing the Kerch Strait Bridge.
I would say I think people like it's Ukraine started and like history started for some people. Like it's wild to me.
Or
like
or war in general seems to have started.
Yeah. It's been wild. But it's been nice having more people actually like involved and interested in these types of things.
Sort of. It could be long. Look, I went to college for all this stuff. Come on. It took some years to get used to not overshooting the mark. And I feel like that happens a lot when these events come up, especially with Israel and Palestine. The other thing I've seen a lot of is people are trying to take sides like it's a football match. And then this is not.
I don't
not
think
okay.
This is the event. Like I'm very openly pro-Palestine, and like the stuff that I can't show is obviously like some of the civilian massacres we've seen. Just to comment on one of those, I posted a little thing. Let me find real quick. So this right here, this is one of the probably the most circulated, not this image, but her corpse is one of the more circulated things that went around, is this girl right here. She essentially is just like only in like underwear and like a bra, but I'm not sure, like because she was at a festival and was a raver, she might have had something like this on where we just couldn't see her front. But I'm saying I hope that there wasn't like sexual violence before her death, but we definitely see that there's like head trauma, probably shot in the head, something like that. But there was a rave that was going on close to where the attack took place.
Yeah.
And the rave was a pro peace thing, not necessarily pro-Palestine, but most of the people who would go to these things are not going to be Zionists and stuff like that are
right.
legitimately like don't want the occupation to continue. She's also, I saw her Instagram and she was speaking like she was writing with the Israeli script, so she is definitely Jewish, but she's a German citizen. And a lot of people were reporting that she was IDF, but the footage we have, her body is being paraded around. People are spitting on it and things like that. And I think also somebody told me that she is a mother as well. But a lot of families are ripped apart by violence. So
Yeah, I think it's important to note that Hamas isn't Palestine as a whole. Um, and that if there's going to be freedom or liberation for Hamas, or excuse me, for Palestine, they need to be able to get themselves out from under Israel just as much as they need to get themselves out from under Hamas, uh, because Hamas exists basically to do violence and to perpetuate violence.
Well, as well, like just general. I mean, even I don't even like the Palestinian Authority because we have to acknowledge that these groups have an interest in maintaining oppression and apartheid. The Palestinian Authority loses political power if that apartheid ends. So
Yes.
why would they want that? So it's also a problem that many nations and states have with a corrupt government that keeps them down. I mean, look at Africa. This is like the story of modern Africa. So that's one of the hardest things for me really is just especially with the information warfare because the IRGC helps a lot on that front and they're one of the best. Russia is the best, but IRGC is a close second. And like like the pro Assad narrative, right? And like people believe that like Assad is actually pro Palestine and we see what he does to Palestinians in his country and it's like it's worse than the fucking Syrians in Idlib half the time of what we see him do to them. That's the one of the more tragic things about the
Yeah,
apartheid to me.
I think the best way to put it is that the Palestinians are a very ill-used people by all of their neighbors
Mm-hmm.
and everyone around them. They're effectively treated as pawns in this conflict, um, and they're the ones who die in this conflict. Uh,
Predominantly, yeah.
yeah, like you have Palestinians who basically live in refugee camps, and they can look out, see, and damn near touch their houses from way back in '48 and '49. Uh, they're just effectively a pawn for the conflict in the region. It's
I agree.
incredibly tragic as a it's incredibly tragic because this didn't have to happen.
I think along with being pawns in the area, I see the same thing with the Kurds who are also um, facing violence right now from Turkey. Um,
Yes,
the
lest we forget.
violence in the northwest Middle East right now is generally out of control. You just had Azerbaijan as well, and uh, Turkey is doing air operations in both Syria and Iraq. So the last thing we need is Iran to get shaken up and start putting IRGC involved in shit right now because the violence in the Middle East is at a height we haven't seen since Daesh right now. And it's not even at the scale of Daesh right now, but you know, it's the most
Intense but local.
significant since then.
Yeah, I think part of it comes as a shock because when we left Afghanistan, I think a lot of Americans forgot about the Middle East again because we had this very weird relationship where we think about the Middle East and then we'd stop thinking about the Middle East basically every 4 years until the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Uh, so it feels for I think for a lot of people like uh, the same old story.
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, it's sort of. Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. Petalist. It's not. I mean, not. We didn't really even think about Afghanistan while we were in Afghanistan,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to say we zoned out in 2014, but we probably zoned out like years before then, the withdrawal or broader withdrawal. We just don't care in general. And this is not just a U.S.
We don't
thing; it's
care
a
about human beings unless
yeah.
they're American citizens. Then you might get some help.
Even then, we don't tend to care about American
Yeah,
citizens.
it depends. You know, for example, this to bring it back to that prisoner exchange, people were mad because a German who had American residency didn't get traded, or like Jamal Khashoggi, the American residency who was killed by Saudi Arabia. Like both of these were swept under the rug by America because
They were
they're not
politically
American
inconvenient.
citizens. They don't care. It's not America's responsibility at the end of the day. So that's how they view it. But
Yeah,
I think a lot of people have just been burned out because of the global war on terror. because I don't think, I mean, it's rare that you see people even defend like the invasion of Iraq specifically nowadays. And I think that's a big part of it is that burnout. Like even when ISIS was at its height, a lot of people were just completely tuned out from it. And then, it was funny because it was a media blitz to get us in there and broadcast it live while they were invading Iraq, but
Well, the second invasion of Iraq, I think, went fairly well for the United States, and afterwards just didn't. Like things deteriorated almost immediately, and that kind of caused attention to wane off of it too. Because I remember that pretty vividly, and I also remember because I was a little bit about me. I was an officer cadet in ROTC up until I got medically disqualified for kidney disease. But like that period of time, 2009, 2010, it felt like a little bit more attention was being paid again, especially with the new coin FM coming out and all that. That was a big topic of discussion for a while, but then it fades out again. Like we intermittently seem to care about this situation, except Africa, where we don't seem to care at all, which is ongoing every day.
It's been an interesting part of Joe Biden's foreign policy, but that's not what we're talking about right now.
Yes. It's just like this kind of felt like it came out of nowhere for a lot of people, but it shouldn't have.
We knew it was coming. It was just a matter of when. The rockets that they have saved up. I don't remember the number off my top of my head. It's like 10,000 or more. Do you know how many?
Let me check. I think Hezbollah has like 100,000.
That they could send, but they're not going to. But yeah, I think that's. I also have a video of them launching rockets. That's what I used.
Yeah, there was a pretty decent couple seconds of rockets coming in.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've seen at least 2 actual impacts, which is crazy because there's thousands were launched.
Well, Iron Dome is a very expensive system. It ought to do something.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's also, at this point, I think that's the whole point of the rocket barrages, is to do an economic cost damage.
Yeah.
Because they don't expect, they fired enough rockets at the thing that they don't expect to actually do damage with rockets. So I think that's really when you look at the Hamas radio silence, that was a big part of it, is that they knew that the next rocket barrage had to be coming with something more significant. The fact that they have a lot of hostages, we don't even know how many hostages they've taken back. They've released photos and identification for people who are specifically in the IDF, but not the civilians. And we don't even know if those regular civilians participated in that. I would certainly hope not. But the aspect of hostages is a big deal. Obviously, if Israel kills its own citizens in Gaza, it's going to even piss off the pro-Israeli parts of the community. We already have a lot of resistance to Netanyahu. So people saying that Gaza is going to be flattened like this. Gaza is definitely going to, the civilians in Gaza will always cost the most. And whenever there is a bombing in Gaza, statistically 50% of the deaths are children, because it has such a high population of children there. So any bombing in Gaza is bad. But hopefully we'll see it a lot more restraint than what we would see if Netanyahu really had total power. I'm sure if there is major bombardments, there will even be protests, and then those protests will get attacked by pro-Zionists because of the images that we've seen of civilian massacres occurring on the street. I think from an optics perspective, this would have been a total victory for Hamas if they didn't do those civilian massacres on the street like that. If they only killed IDF, that would be an optics victory for them. It would make them look better for a lot of people. So
actually, this part that's sort of been sticking in the back of my mind. Because whenever the Hamas release videos or Hamas's guys are on video, they were usually behaving in a not respectable, but in a controlled fashion as far as terror groups go. Right?
Yeah.
They were beating back normal civilians who wanted to get their punches in. They were actually being polite to their hostages, right? Saying, "Oh, please stop worrying. If we wanted to kill you, we would have killed you." Stuff like that. So I'm wondering if PIJ was the group behind the massacres, a lot of the massacres, because it's a very stark contrast. And it looks like it was just a joint offensive that got out of hand. Because, I mean,
Yeah. Before you, I just 2 seconds. Hezbollah did not mention PIJ being involved in their statement, but that's all I know as far as that goes. Sorry, go ahead.
because it's just sort of a thing that you have.
Oh, I
happen,
meant
right?
him. He was about to talk.
No, like there's also the possibility, like there are a lot of possibilities. It could be that some Hamas, units got out of hand and some didn't. It could very well be that the flow of people out of Gaza who brought weapons might have decided to get some retribution in. Like there's a lot of possibilities that we just don't know yet. It'll take time to figure it out if anyone's even inclined to figure out what happened. There's a very good chance that this will all get swept under a bunch of Merkavas. So, like I anticipate that they're going to start moving into Gaza within the next day or so. The IDF, rather.
Actually, I think they already started.
They might have, but like we haven't. I'm checking. We haven't seen.
They
it
still, they still have points that they need to recapture, and because it's night, they're probably like planning assaults at the, or
They're
Yeah, I
probably conducting the assaults, right? Because the IDF has a nighttime advantage.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Hamas doesn't have knots mostly.
Yeah,
And
I don't
real,
think I'd
those real
fancy.
lockdown elements.
I don't think I'd fancy being a Hamas fighter right now in the area they got into. They're probably being hunted down pretty quick.
It's for them; they'll be shaheeds. So
yeah,
there's a
I always
motivation.
forget my objective was to stay alive.
Yeah, there's a different motivation for them. Something that like we can't really even experience or understand or identify with. But here, say we're just talking about Hamas media. They've been doing this a lot too. The like dubstep drop, like that's been a stock sound effect we have seen in Hamas media forever now. Like not forever, but in all their videos in the last few years. Not even that, just them, just this type of media in general. Kind of underwhelming. But anyway, I think this really illustrates to people what kind of rockets we're talking about and how portable these things actually are to move.
Yeah, they can shoot and scoot with those.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's interesting. Like I'm pretty sure I would love to know, because I bet you that's one of those pre-made trailer music companies' soundtracks, if they're licensing the music. Like, is that what part of Hamas's budget goes to, licensing trailer music?
They do. I mean, I was just mentioning because I love if anyone has seen it, there's like a children's show they have with a Hamas Mickey Mouse. So like they actually spent money on doing children's programming back in the day. So they definitely have a pretty decent chunk of media apparatus. We've also, one of the things that we saw is the leader of Hamas. They assume he's in Qatar, and he's like looking at the TV, like laughing about the attacks or something like that. Of course, Qatar is such a weird government, like their existence is literally just to like house terrorist groups that have asylum from other places.
Yeah, there's the moment where NBS, KSA, Mohammed bin Salman from Saudi Arabia wanted to invade Qatar, and we should have let that happen.
It was because of Al Jazeera, though, specifically, I thought, because they said not nice things about him.
we should have just let that happen. I mean, Rex Tillerson was like, "Please don't invade guitar," but let's face it, the guitar is very annoying, and just politically because they're basically the financial hub of global terrorism, and it doesn't matter which sect they support; they just do. Tillerson was like, "Please don't invade guitar."
Was it reflecting on you? Did you open yourself?
No, sorry. Someone said my audio wasn't going through. I think it's you, Contraband, because I just checked and we have audio.
Yeah, I've been hearing you fine. So
yeah, so I'm not sure what the situation. Why? Oh, now it's not working.
I can still hear you. So
There it goes.
if it does fuck up, there'll be a VOD just that you
Yeah,
can
you might
probably
have to send
download
that
from
to
here
me.
anyway, and you can just re-upload it. I just wanted to check something real quick. I just wanted to where's my post? My posts haven't been showing up. I wanted to because I realized I didn't share it on like our business account. My posts just haven't been showing up on my feed today, and I've been like basically I posted like everything I could find that was like legitimate and circulated from the conflict. But for little wrap ups here, do we want to get into what are going to be like the greater circumstances of this? We already saw the U.S. doing neocon shit. Is Iran talking about how they're going to get involved. We think we're going to see anything like that as far as like geopolitics?
The Iranians probably aren't going to do much. I guess at least with their own guys, right? Because the Assad regime's still struggling.
Yeah, especially lately.
Ooh.
The
We didn't even
the
talk
chat
about.
said they can hear you, so.
Yeah, I was confuzzled. My microphone might have come unplugged for a second, and my camera just messed up. That's fun, but I'll fix that later.
Anyway.
We didn't even get to talk about the Assad regime having a graduation ceremony at the military academy.
Yeah.
Losing
I posted
250
it.
guys.
How many people died there?
North of 250, I think.
And generals as well.
Yeah, at least. Two
Yeah.
generals.
Maybe, thanks, Contraband. Maybe don't have graduation ceremonies in a country where everyone's getting bombed. Just a thought.
Yeah, well, I guess they were a little late, and that's why civilian casualties happened. And if they were just a few minutes earlier, because like you can see, there's a video of right before it happened. Like they graduate, and like all the family members run in, and that I think that's one of the main reasons why it was so devastating. But this was also going on while
Turkey's bombing northern Syria.
Yeah, well, Turkey's bombing northern Syria,
and
now Idlib is also like Idlib. The bombing of Idlib is probably what's happening in Idlib is probably going to be worse than what's going to happen to Gaza. Honestly, and it has been for a long time. I mean, we saw the thermite munitions today again, a lot of them too, just indiscriminate bombing throughout Idlib, which are also mostly civilians.
Are we allowed to say turbo support for HTS? Which is,
I mean, we do have a video on terrorist groups that you can check out, a terrorist tier list on 5th Gen Information Warfare, if you want to learn more about what James just said and you have no idea what he said. But no, I don't think we're allowed to say that.
Yeah, YouTube might get a little
coming
upset.
For you now.
Knock, knock. Yeah, no, it's early yet.
Fine. I think it's fine when Assadists get clapped, and I don't care who does it.
Yeah,
pretty good.
That'll be fair. Yeah, I think, to be honest, it's a little early to see what'll happen. The IDF will certainly respond. They'll probably have to go through Gaza and try to find a whole bunch of hostages, which will be a nightmare operation. An absolute nightmare.
Well, hopefully they can, because we don't know their goals, right? Like their entire goal might be to get leverage, and they don't plan on doing, because like back in the day, some of the, like I remember there's this like Mondo film about justifying the war in Iraq, and it basically by the end it like shows like the videos we saw of like Saddam cutting off people's hands and stuff. It was like all those collected tapes, right? It was like Gonzo type stuff. And then by the end of it, it becomes this like Zionist conspiracy thing about how we need to protect Israel at all costs and kill the Palestinians. And then like I think that's where I saw my first beheading was actually from like as a kid seeing this Mondo tape. And it was like a Palestinian done one.
What does it say about our generation? I can't even remember what the first beheading I ended up seeing was.
Yeah, I know, right?
like they all kind of blurred together.
Well, that's there's certain ones that stand out to me. And then there's other ones that just they all look the same because they're like blurry. Like the first beheading in Iraq stands. I think his name is Mike Foley.
The journalist, right?
Zarqawi takes his head off in a second, literally a second, exactly a second. To cut through somebody's spine in a second, like clearly Zarqawi has experience with dismembering and disposing of bodies.
Yes.
If he can cut through somebody that quick. But like a lot of times we'll see it where they like, you know, like another big example is now this one might be Mike Foley, but it's the one that's done by the Beatles. I was one of the first people to say that it was a soundstage and that it wasn't actually being filmed in the desert, and people called me a conspiracy theorist. And then we found like the actual soundstage
That it was done on, yeah.
they couldn't get the beheading on camera because they kept fucking it up because these guys were not killers. They were like British kids, you know. So those two kind of stand out for me specifically. Anyway.
Yeah. It's early yet. We'll see what happens over the next couple days. I'm sure everyone and their mother will reconvene with an opinion as soon as something else happens.
Yeah.
Because I noticed how all of Twitter became experts in Israeli-Palestinian relations today.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be entertaining.
Oh, have you guys been following Iran Defense?
Is that a page?
Yeah, Twitter
I've
account.
mainly been looking just at media that's been posted in the last 24 hours. But no.
So I'm pretty sure he's an Iranian citizen. Speaks Persian. He's more on top of things relating to, I guess, military aid and assistance from Iran to Iran's proxy groups.
Mm-hmm.
So he's been
And
making
just
a
to
lot.
comment on that, we have a recent video about Kirkuk that we just put out, in that we show a little bit about how Iran's supply convoys actually do reach the fighters in Syria. Not so much Hamas, but you'll see. We show lines on a map, and it's really easy to see. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just dropped the link into the private chat. He's been logging IDF losses, so they've lost quite a bit of, not quite a bit. It's about not actually all that much in equipment losses. Most of the kit they've lost has been like it looks like the convoy for a quick reaction force, or the base for a quick reaction force.
Yes,
and
the vehicles in this
Border Patrol
image were the vehicles in that video that I showed.
Yeah, that looks like part of a Humvee. Yeah,
Yeah, well,
that's the same vehicles.
Yeah, this frame specifically, I remember at the end of the video. I remember seeing this video, like it's right there in the back corner there. So these are definitely from that specifically. But we also like one of the vehicles, one of the Humvees we saw, it was marked with like farmers. So like that was probably not Hamas. You know, that was like more of like raiding. I won't want to call them raiders. This would be more of like a looting situation because they're civilians, and you know, they're held to a different account, obviously. But anything that we want to like include at the end here that we didn't put in here that we should have talked about?
I don't think so. I think we're about at the limit of what we can responsibly do at this point.
Yeah, and
That's right.
and it's not like there's a ton of bad info out there. It's mostly just reportings on bombings in Gaza that didn't happen, that are old bombings, which is like easy to do because Israel normally calls people and then says, hey, we're going to bomb this exact location. So then everyone gets to set up their cameras and get like 100 angles of it. So we tend to see bombings in Gaza be recirculated as misinformation and things like that. But I have seen a lot of infrared and thermal cameras of like targets being hit by the IDF and things like that. So they certainly have responded. And then there's a photo where it's basically they have guys stripped in their underpants in riot cuffs, but there's like 50 guys laid out there. So they've definitely taken back and responded to a significant amount of territory. But as far as we know, still they have Hamas has control of 3 different areas. We don't know exactly what they mean by areas. We've seen certain bases get control. Like there was an air base that got control of that people were worried about the F-35 being there and stuff, which if they were able to destroy that, it would be a significant
it would be
price tag.
embarrassing, but we just bomb it. So, or the IDF would just bomb it. It wouldn't,
Yeah,
Oh,
they'd
no, no,
bomb
I
it
meant
anyway if it.
They would destroy it. Like Hamas would destroy those airframes.
Oh yeah.
That would be an economic cost.
ooh, we have a request to respond to a video. I just tagged you into a link to it.
And Twitter here, if my Twitter is
Yep.
working. 10-minute review in your stream. An unbiased history. Okay.
Uh-oh.
This
This
might
isn't
be
going to be
bad.
good.
So sometimes StreamYard is kind of iffy with my internet connection. So I'm gonna hopefully with these types of videos, they're like still images, but I'm not gonna put this in HD.
Okay.
And anyone who's watching can, if they want to see it in HD or whatever, they can go to the original creator and check them out. Let me close some tabs real quick so I have the best.
I always feel like if someone is leading with "I'm not biased," you're going to be in trouble.
It's a mess.
We try to say that we leave morality out of it, because we certainly present biases, but I just try to. I mean, I'm already emotionally dead inside from seeing this for like a decade, so it's pretty
That's
easy
fair.
to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
morality
a
out of
pretty
it.
similar approach that we take.
Somebody in the chat says F-35s are kind of shitty, aren't they? No.
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 A
They're
lot of the
quite good.
reporting you see on how shitty they are, like how they got downed by a giant bird, those were like test craft and prototypes, right? So we want those to have bad tests. We want the gun to not shoot straight on that prototype because then you can identify and straighten the gun.
Laserpig has dealt with this problem already. Let's litigate it.
I think Hassan was just crying about this. So
yes, he earned my ire with his China takes not too long ago.
oh yeah, we posted some videos reacting to those. I have another one
2056.
coming
Oh,
up.
this is going to be a mess. 2056 AD.
Underground
That's
Israel, ancestral land of the Jewish people. Few dare tell its great history. Many believe it to be a long, complex, highly controversial story.
Jesus
However,
Christ.
you've been lied to. Israel's history is simple, objective, and, as the Torah teaches us, best told through the Fallout experience. So, much like inspecting a terrorist outpost after being bombed by the Israeli Air Force, by the time we're done, you'll quickly realize that Israel did nothing wrong.
Okay.
Thousands of years
Oh,
ago,
whoa,
the
whoa,
Jewish people
whoa.
were
What was
chosen
this
by
about not
God and
being
promised the
biased?
Holy Land. Whether it was because of their unfathomable IQ, moral purity, or
I
high
can't tell if
perseverance
this is
matters little. What does
satire.
matter is that everyone else was jelly as hell, couldn't take the banter, and destroyed the grand Jewish civilization, renaming the Holy Land with the foreign imperialist name of Palestine. Now, all spread out through this fallen, post-apocalyptical world, the Jewish people, resented for their unmatched skills, were only allowed to partake in trading and finances. This was a mistake.
There's a
More
lot of-
persecutions followed.
lot
By
of
the 19th
adjectives being
century,
thrown in
thousands
on
of
this
Jews
history.
began migrating back home for spiritual reconnection, only to find their ancestral lands occupied by Muslim Arabs.
Oh my
Any
God.
good sources will tell you that Arabs have no claim to the land, and Islam is just yet another Torah
Not Arabs,
fanfiction.
by the
But
way.
with Jewish
Just make
hatred
sure
through the
Semitic
roof.
people.
Huh? What?
Oh, we should probably note that the Palestinians are not Arabs. They are ethnically Semitic. They just speak an Arabic language or an Arabic dialect because
I
of
think
the
if
Arabic.
anyone who identifies as Arabic and who is also Palestinian is Arabic to me,
That's fair.
I'm going to avoid agreeing with James on this one.
oh, geez, this is. Oh, okay.
Well, it's a pain in the ass, right? Because you'll see Israelis say that, oh, they are other, they are Arabic. When, like, ethnically speaking, Israelis and Palestinians are literally the closest ethnic groups between the two clusters, right? It
And
doesn't make any.
this is something that's advanced by a lot of people who support the one state solution. Not to be confused with the one from the 70s that's like weird as hell, but the modern one that is just a direct democracy thing where like the Palestinians will get 14% of the vote if I did my math right and remembered numbers correctly.
Yeah, that has the West Wing special episode vibes to it. Isaac and Ishmael.
If the West Wing wasn't copyrighted, I'd love to like watch through the entire thing on a stream. And like, I mean, I'm sure you can on like some of these platforms they have now. So they
Oh,
don't
we're all
care.
going to Kick.
Yeah, maybe I'll go do West Wing on Kick.
Oof. Unfazed by this,
How
average
talking
Jew
solves every
Fyodor
problem in the
Herzl
world.
organized the Zionist movement, advocating for a new Jewish state. One dead archduke later, the Brits took over the Holy Land and helped more Jews to migrate back home. The Arab occupiers began to riot. The Brits caved in and limited Jewish immigration, and the Jews protested this action. The new United Nations proposed a god-awful partition plan to divide the Holy Land between Jews and Arabs. The chosen people accepted anyway, and declared independence as the Great State of Israel, a secular
more
democracy where all
adjectives
would
that
be
you're
free
throwing
to
in there
prosper,
that you
Jew,
clearly
Muslim,
are not
and all
bi- you're
others
clearly
alike,
not the
while the
unbiased
Arabs
history
declared
guy
war.
here.
The 1948
Yeah.
invasion of Israel by the Arab League ended exactly as you would expect. Arab humiliation.
Okay.
700,000
His
Palestinians.
Wow.
avatar has little stars of David as hairbands as well.
Wow. Okay. I guess it's technically correct.
I mean, it just feels anti-Semitic. Just all of the media he's using. The words he's saying aren't incorrect, but the
adjectives.
Media,
It's the adjectives.
yeah,
Yes.
adjectives.
That's why I always say like adjectives do not belong in like journalism or history. As soon as he starts hearing like rapid fire adjectives like proxy war, fuck off, get out of here. I don't want to hear your fucking interpretation of what's going on.
Made refugees by the invading Arab armies, but in Palestinian folklore, they blamed the Jews and called this event the Nakba, the catastrophe. The young officers, Ariel Sharon and Moshe Dayan, had a good time. As Israel thrived in a sea of third-world misery, its leaders were able to focus on what would become its main export, Mossad PSYOPs.
Oh
Take
my
a long
God.
evening to look at Israel's successful assassinations list to get
Okay.
what Mossad is all about. Be you the architect of the Holocaust hiding in Argentina or Moroccan, you are not safe. Bitter at defeat and failing to take the Jewish banter, the Arab League formed the Palestinian Liberation.
This is like saying like look at all the smuggles that the smuggling weapons. How many weapons has the ISI smuggled? It's like that's the point of that intelligence apparatus. Like the Mossad was set up specifically to hunt down Nazis who got away with doing the Holocaust. Like, of course, like no shit, they've done assassinations. This is like straight up just like framing like. You know how like this is a commie meme where it's like my grandparents died because of Stalin, and then it's like the grandparents and it's like Hitler. You know that meme? That's what's going on right now.
This is words.
It is words.
Organization to terrorize Israel, an effort they didn't lack. Yasser Arafat took it over and became terrorist-in-chief.
How we feel about Yasser Arafat? Hot takes. Let's go.
Kind of ugly, but that's about it.
Yeah, kind of
Yeah.
ugly. I think he was extremely successful in what he set out to accomplish. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, to this day, the interpretation of how the human shields are used, that human shield thing that we hear all the time as justification on why civilians died by Israel, that eventually became a response to his tactics. But before Israel had powerful friends like the United States, people think that this relationship existed forever and like Israel didn't sink United States ships. One ship, but anyway, the Arafat's strategy of being in Lebanon, sending rockets, and then making sure civilians got hit with the retaliation, and then going to the UN and framing it. Like we even see that today, left over in media strategies from groups like Hamas and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think his impact on the situation is always greatly underestimated in that regard.
Yeah, Arafat is probably one. He's probably the most successful Palestinian leader of all time. He fanned the conflict out. He made his goals. Whether that success is a good thing or not, well, it's not. Let's just say it's not. And be done with it.
I wouldn't even say it's
If you
not a
want
good
to.
thing. I would say it's. You take morality out of it. It is. Well, I guess you can't really take morality out of it.
I would say it's
I think-
effective.
Yeah,
Yes,
effective.
it was efficacious.
Yeah.
But not a dinner party strategy.
I think also, if we want to talk about that type of framing being part of like the peace talks, like Camp David, stuff like that, like the reason why a genocide was prevented in Afghanistan was ultimately because of something he had a hand in. Like that came along with the peace with Sadat, with the peace talks going on between him and the Israeli leadership under Carter. So that's also important because everyone wants to act like the Afghan jihad is the reason why everything happened, like 9/11 and the war on terror. Not like there was like multiple jihads throughout the world after the 1979 one in Iran, and it's like, America was involved in giving weapons to a certain group. If anything, we should criticize how empowering Zia-ul-Haq and the ISI eventually made Pakistan a nuclear state.
Yeah,
It's combined with Egypt and 3 other Arab
Nobody's
nations
allowed to
all
debate me on
mobilizing
that
against
point.
Israel again in 1967, the Jews could predict what would follow from a Gaza Strip away. Psyoping the Arabs into complacency, nuking their entire air force and letting generals like Sharon and Dayan take over the Sinai Peninsula, West Bank and Golan Heights, all in 6 days. The tears collected from captured Arabs that week sustained the Israeli salt market to this day. But crying wasn't enough to stop the enemies of Zion. 6 years later, the Arabs
That's an especially dumb joke considering that like they have the Dead Sea, like the salt that they can export and mine is like,
Unlimited?
like that's just kind of a dumb joke and doesn't really take into account Israelis' exports and mining and things like that.
invaded Israel again in the holy Jewish day of Yom Kippur. Despite such treachery, Sharon halted their advance, but at great cost.
Speaking of which, this is like the anniversary of that
Yeah,
war
it's
was yesterday.
the anniversary was yesterday.
In that war, Israel's KD fell to just 7-1. The Holy Land secured, many Jews migrated to the reconquered lands of their ancestors, building new Jewish communities in the West Bank, the first settlements. Illegal? Against international law?
Remember when Hitler did that with Poland?
yeah.
Was it right then, guys? What do
No.
we think? Hot takes.
Uh,
Hitler, come on, guys. What do we think about Hitler? Let's hear some hot takes on Hitler.
Well,
that
I like
Hitler
his
had some
skin
bad
back.
ideas.
What'd you say?
He was. At least he's the guy who killed Hitler.
Yeah, that's what Jack always says. And then I'll be like, no, it wasn't. I'll say like it was Private McGillicuddy on an infiltration mission. You've been lied to. It was America. America killed Hitler. They won the war, and they're the heroes of the world.
Law?
Well,
What
yeah.
law? If advocating for us getting ethnically cleansed from the area is your thing, then I see you haven't been paying attention to the score. Contrary to popular and UN belief, Israel has always led the pursuit to long-term peace. Proof being Israel's return of the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt, just asking in return for them to stop being so cringe. The Egyptian leader got murdered for it, and
Yeah, because that totally wasn't a Jimmy Carter thing. It was definitely Israel making that front in a sentence.
a decade later, the Lebanese became very cringe. I'm not gonna bother explaining the Lebanese civil war to you.
That's because it's impossible. I mean, you do history. What do you think? Can you explain the Lebanese Civil War?
No one knows. We're all faking it.
Okay.
I wasn't supposed to say that out loud.
The Lebanon's history, modern history especially,
It's
is
difficult.
Really hard. It's
It's
really hard.
it's a multiple masters level.
And it also hasn't helped me learn too much about it doesn't help that much with current day situation in Lebanon.
Yeah, it's like a very disconnected little entangled thing.
Yeah.
It's like the three kingdoms of the Middle East.
Well, also with Arafat, that was the height of Palestinian nationalism, right? And that fell out of favor, and Hezbollah came up,
Yeah,
being like, "Hey, we're protecting you from Israel, who bombed you because Arafat was here." And that's when we started seeing more of like the Islamic type radicalism. But before that, like there was, hostages in Lebanon all the time. Like Lebanon used to be like the hot country back in the day. For
It
like
was the place.
the US, the US was always like, "Oh no."
Yes.
There used to be a phrase that they would use called it was the Lebanization of things.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
obviously that fell apart when
that
the
didn't age
bombing of the
well.
barracks happened. There was a turn of the 2000s computer game the Marines sponsored called First the Fight that was set in Lebanon. It used to be the place to be up until we got our new friend in Afghanistan.
Who? Sirajuddin Haqqani or Bin Laden?
Yes.
One of those. Okay.
Imagine spending 30 years fighting multiple militias under foreign occupation just for at the end your national army still only be the second biggest military force in your country. Enter Hezbollah. You see, Iran is more than just a theocratic hellhole, it's also a connoisseur of paid shilling. While Lebanon was on fire, it propped up a Shia militia group called Hezbollah to fight against the Israeli peacekeeping forces entering South Lebanon. And despite being solely funded by the worthless monopoly money known
You can't call them peacekeeping forces if they're occupying a place. Like that's so cringe.
This is no, stop, please.
This is awful. It's like if it feels it's also like the anti-Semitic undertones are there too. Like
Yeah, it feels like it's memeing, but not memeing.
it's very weird.
Known as Iranian Rials, the Lebanese never kicked them out. Surrounded by terrorists in either hostile or incompetent states, Israel was never.
What about Cyprus? Cyprus is right there.
There's no water on his maps. Why is there no water on his maps?
Should we even talk about Cyprus? I feel like that's like we're gonna piss off.
It's not surrounded by enemies. Cyprus is right there.
I mean, that depends
Also,
on how
you could say Greece is technically, it depends on how we argue over the EEZs with Turkey on if Greece is next to Israel.
I think Greece would say that Turkey doesn't exist, and therefore,
Well, so what Turkey would say.
They would say that about each other. Jesus, NATO is just like a giant cat herding operation.
To the First Intifada. Ask an anti-Zionist influencer what the First Intifada was, and he'll demand your attention for an entire week. Ask an Intifada partaking terrorist instead, and he'll be very straightforward. A huge anti-Israeli revolt broke out, rocks were thrown, civilians were killed, excuses were given, and the results were predictable. Now remember, Egypt exists, and it's ruled by idiots. Thanks to that, they allowed a splinter faction of their theocratic...
It is now, that's dude. Like,
when he's right, he's right.
It's so funny, Sadat specifically, because like this is a guy who's quoted Hitler in his justification of war against the Jews, and then like right before the founder of Al Qaeda helped clap him, he was being hailed as the great peacemaker of the world. Did he get a Nobel Prize too, as well?
Oh shit, did he?
I would imagine he did. I think we should. I think everyone involved with the talks, including Jimmy Carter, did, but I'm not positive. Either way,
good.
Oh yeah, he
we
did.
should stop giving Nobel Prizes to fascists.
Anwar Sadat, Jimmy Carter, and what is it? Menachem Begin.
Menachem Begin.
Menachem Begin. Fuck.
I wouldn't have been if you didn't say it. I wouldn't have been able to remember who it was. I just know that I've heard the name.
Yeah.
Party to infiltrate Gaza, renaming themselves as Hamas. Be it the French or Russian Revolution, World War I, capitalism or communism, Hamas will tell you the Jews were behind it all, call for jihad with no peace as an option while proclaiming themselves to be a humanist movement. Their whole ideology can be summarized as the average Malaysian basket-weaving forum post. But not even their constant tunnel building could stop Israel's quest for peace. In 1993, Israeli Prime Minister Rabin and Arafat, under the auspices of Bill Clinton, signed the Oslo Accords.
Based.
Giving the PLO recognition and tons of self-governance, just asking them to stop being terrorists in return. After a little trolling, later came Prime Minister Barak to finish the deal, offering 90% of the West Bank, many settlements to be destroyed, East Jerusalem, allowing many 1948 refugees to return. It was everything Palestinians could practically hope for. Arafat, with such a great offer for a Palestinian state at hand, he launched the Second Intifada. In the midst of such chaos came Ariel Sharon again, getting elected prime minister. After securing the Palestinian cities whose self-governance was exploited to host terror attacks, imagine that, Sharon ordered built the only thing that could allow for peaceful coexistence with Palestinians. Enter the wall. The Israeli West Bank barrier was built all across the West Bank's borders, including in many settlements deep into the West Bank for added security. Illegal land grab? Segregation? Apartheid state? Sounds like I just found a volunteer for a new Mossad experiment. Think of the Oslo Accord status quo like a walled-off kindergarten. Inside, the Palestinians are able to express their youthful excesses without bothering the grown-ups. And whenever things get too rowdy, the adults are ready to storm in and ensure the peace. Despite the second Intifada being over, Arafat dying and Mr. Abbas succeeding him to power, Sharon's big Jewish heart still yearned for long-term peace. As a show
That's
of
what I'm
goodwill,
talking about. See, that's the stuff I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Like,
that's weird.
It's like it's racist against both sides. It's so weird.
Yeah, it might be unbiased only in that it's horrible to everyone.
he pulled all Israeli troops and settlements out of Gaza, and the Palestinians followed this up by using their newfound self-governance by voting for Hamas. Things then got too
Yeah, but how do we feel about that election specifically, where Hamas got power?
That was probably a mistake.
How do we?
It
feel
was
about
probably inevitable.
How do we feel about the cables involved with it? Do we know about the cables involved with it?
I do not know about the cables
Well,
involved.
Israel and the U.S. helped them come into power. Israel
Yeah.
was specifically, they literally have leaked cables where Israel said that they want Hamas to come to power because it's going to justify what they can do to annex and stuff like that. They literally said that. Because the rival party, Fatah, was a fragment of the PLO. PLO already had legitimacy from this history that was presented here. So if we are to believe these cables that are legitimate, potentially that, and especially with information, like when we say that Russia hacked elections, we're not talking about them going in and doing voting machines. It was information warfare, and people are just too stupid to explain what that is to people. It's very hard for like your average like Rachel Maddow to understand what information warfare is, and then she herself gets targeted by that information warfare and goes down a rabbit hole and eventually gets like disposed and disgraced from media and stuff like that. You know how it goes. But there is a potential that this is completely wrong and Hamas did not actually come to power democratically, and we don't know even in Gaza how many people actually even like Hamas, because it's not like you can speak out against them. You know, people who are
Right.
even Palestinians who still have Palestinian citizen won't talk shit about Hamas anywhere because it's unsafe for them and their families. So, doubt.
rowdy. The PLO kicked Hamas from the West Bank and kept an illegal hold on power, and Hamas bombed the PLO out of
Gee, I wonder who benefited splitting Palestinian leadership apart like that.
Gaza. The Gaza
clue.
Strip was blockaded, unemployment rose to 50%, living standards crashed, and most money sent to Gaza was turned into rockets. So betrayed was Ariel Sharon, he fell into a permanent coma until his death. Some Jews are too good for this cruel world. Getting attacked, bombing terrorists, making truces, and getting refused long-term peace. Such became Israel's modern predicament. As for Hamas, ironically, they didn't like getting blown up, and so began putting their
Would we describe Israel's situation since the Second Intifada as at war or a general peace going on? It's mostly been them not having things happen to them and bombing.
Yeah, it's mostly been Israel doing unto others before it's done unto them.
Yeah, defense.
Yes. Which
their
is, of course, the
military
golden
assets
rule.
beside schools, hospitals, and civilian areas to discourage Israeli.
Oh, do you think that they're civilian areas because like basically all the buildings have been bombed in Gaza and like it has like the highest population density of anywhere else? You think that might have to do with the
That has a
civilian
lot
areas
to do
being
with it,
hit?
I would imagine.
Yeah,
There's nowhere else to stay. Your Airbnb got blown up.
And this is a big thing that I really don't like with a lot of the history channels is they try to use like we just did a PAX history thing where we were laughing at him going through Italy's entire history to say like some minute point on why they're not a democracy. But like they try to like legitimize like one bad take like they'll have further down the line after their mid-roll, and then it's just like they try to back it up with history knowledge, and it's like that had nothing to do with what you just said, bro. What are you doing?
the bombardment. But the noble
It gets
Israelis
into-
came up with a counter.
Hang on. It gets into a lot of like what we started doing, what we're doing here is just to kind of talk, at least generally, and get people understanding how you do history instead of how the what if altists and tick histories and all that happen. That's a big reason of why we got started in the first place.
And tick history probably, I describe a lot of people as wormser brains. He actually has rocks for brains. it's a more advanced condition.
Yeah.
It's just like the fact that he just can't cope with the whole like Hitler not being fascist. He's like I'm fascist, so Hitler can't be fascist because we all decided he's evil.
Yeah, he's been having a very long hissy fit. The other one, I don't know if you ever watched What If Altist, but he is.
Yeah, we have, but we generally like his videos are like hard to like do something on because
Yes, it's painful. It's physically difficult.
It's off the wall.
It's actually physically painful to watch.
No, we like we bring in a friend who's a history major and make him watch shit like that.
Yeah, you're not gonna have a friend for much longer, are you?
Oh, but it's really funny and it gets us views.
Strategy, roof knocking. Basically, if you're a
Roof
Palestinian
knocking.
civilian hosting terrorists or their equipment in your house, the first bomb means get out. The phone call means
There's
get
a
out
great
now.
Jon Stewart joke about this where remember when all apps were free, but if you get the $1 or the 99-cent version, then it would be like ad free,
Yeah.
So there's the joke is that Jon Stewart responds with this. It's like, well, that's the 99-cent version, where you get the alert bomb, for the free version, you have to watch an ad first.
And the second bomb means your fault. But even if all else fails, Israel can always rely on the Iron Dome system, a network of targeted missile launchers that intercept 90% of Hamas's
me?
rockets. And the best part? America pays for it all.
Thank you. At
Life
least
in
that's
modern
there.
Israel is, in short, a glorious one. Best represented by the settlement's vault dweller-like experience. You
Okay.
enjoy your days among the wonders and glories of first world living
is, like,
standards,
so
filled
not
with
touch
forced
grass
conscription, great food, and
This
abundant
guy
fertile
lives in a vault.
labor in the holy land of your ancestors, all surrounded by thick, massively reinforced walls. And should you make the mistake of venturing into the lawless lands beyond, you'll be quickly reminded of why that wall was built in the first place. Despite Israel's best efforts, a Palestinian state still doesn't exist. The conflict rages on, and once
Despite
more Jews
Israel's
must
best
endure being
efforts.
hated just for being that good at everything they do. If after watching this you feel compelled to subscribe to certain channels and to defend Israel's honor against the unending hordes of Twitter lefties, then don't be too bothered by the beeping sound coming from inside your head. That just means the experiment worked. Gotta go now. I have been speaking for over 10 minutes and not once shilled an advertised product. I have to leave this place before the Grand Priest finds out and executes me for incompetence. I would thank the many members of the Merchant Guild for funding these videos and being true.
Okay, that was bizarre to say the least.
Yeah, well,
Well, that
weird
happened.
choice for that.
That definitely happened. Yeah.
It was a thing.
It's a thing that exists.
God, I was gonna say something there at the end. But then you
You're
said
so
I didn't.
very wowed.
So people, a lot of people have the interpretation that the only reason the problem exists in the way it does, in the state it does today, is because of Israeli occupation. To close, how do we feel on that?
It's complicated. I mean, the Palestinians would still be fighting to throw Israel out because it's. I mean, it's just going by even the accepted boundaries that were delineated. Those aren't great for Palestinians, right? The ones that are currently in place, or the boundaries in place, they also suck. But you're going to have conflict either way. It's worse now because Israel is markedly more powerful than the Palestinian or PLO.
Palestinian Authority.
the Palestinian Authority, PLO, Mossad, but it's just not really. There, I don't know. It needs to be a one-state solution.
I
I,
agree. I generally agree with that type of thing. It's just that's the both. Honestly, in my opinion, mostly Israel have both sides have shown that the two-state solution is just not viable. It's a justification to continue apartheid and what some would define as genocide.
Yeah, I think to quote the Vorlon Kosh from Babylon 5, they are a closed circle. They feed into one another and create conflict with one another, and will do so for as long as they both think they're going to get their own state.
Yeah, and it's especially the governments as well here. It's a good lesson on why you want to avoid hierarchical structures and these types of things, because then you get to this situation.
Yes. So like they're very much a.
I agree. I agree, nerd.
I am. I own it. Yeah, it's very much they feed into one another and work to enhance each other's ability to create conflict.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. And like I said, for me, mainly because of my political position, I mainly see the authority structures as being the problem here and not the people. And a lot of times people are, you know, sometimes it's not even like, you know, it's the conditions that they're in. It's funny because Iran is so involved with all this, and like Iran's general public, like 60% at least of the country is in forums that hate Iran. Like on Telegram, we've seen like 60 to 75% of Iran's media, its bandwidth in general, goes to people who hate Iran or are trying to organize the state's downfall. Like, that is a shitty state if your people hate you that much.
Yes.
So it's there's not always, you can't always give the excuse of people are at their own devices when it comes to like fascism and that type of stuff. I think. Anything else? We want to close it there.
Yeah, I think we have. I think we have tortured ourselves at this point now.
All right. So I'm gonna hit end stream. Thanks
right.
for listening and thanks for watching Future.
Thanks for
Watchers.
having us.